So, as some of you and who have been on the first 2 weeks, again, thanks to Chris and Derry GAA for allowing me and inviting me to take part in their webinar series. This is my third week, so 3 out of 3 was the last one, and delighted to be joined by Richard. And of course, thanks to yourselves for jumping on, and this is a great resource that Chris is going to have to send out to the clubs, as well as some of the resources that I'm going to talk about now. So if you're on the first webinar with me, you would have seen this slide before. I was the warm-up act for Terence McWilliams on week 1. I flew solo last week, and as you can see, I'm the warm-up act again for another master, Richard Cheetham, before he takes over. Richard is someone I've got to know over the last few years, having first come across him when I was with Ulster GAA, and he did a workshop with us and the IFA staff as part of a Sport NI conference. Just kind of how he facilitated the learning that day through a game called Bangkok Traffic Jam. And it's something that's kind of resonated with me in how I was coaching at the time, as well as what I'd learned from Terence, as well as my other colleagues during the in-service training with Ulster GAA. So obviously delighted and thrilled to have Richard on with me and to be his warm-up act. He's another one of my mentors, but he's also becoming a good friend as well. So you'll get a lot out of him later on. That's why I'm kind of going to rush through mine, because he's worth it. So again, you would have seen this slide before, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit different. If I reflect kind of on my own coaching practices, and in terms of the nursery program and why I do what I do and how I coach, because what you're going to hear from me and Richard, just like you have over the previous 2 weeks, is what works for me and Richard today mightn't work for Gavin, who's on the call, I know as well, or mightn't work for Chris. But again, having to think about your why, how you're coaching, who you're coaching, what you're coaching as well. So a lot of today as well as our experiences and kind of where we're coming from. So when I think about kind of my favorite coach, a lot of the time, kind of within reason, when I was younger, we as children, we set the agenda of what we wanted to do. So we always asked for games. We always picked fun activities that were enjoyable and made us smile, obviously laugh, but ultimately learn, even though we didn't realize we were. We didn't keep the score to any sort of accuracy, and the teams were picked by us, which looking back on is something that the coach probably should have done instead of letting us pick. Having the last person picked last is not a good feeling. So, but it's something as well that everyone was playing and they all had their own unique contribution to the game that was happening. So even though they were picked last, they obviously had a big influence on that game that we were playing, because everybody was playing. So at the time as well, we are our own coaches. We put jumpers down on the gravel or on the grass for goal posts, obviously. The game would start with me or a friend who would have a ball, and then it would end up being 20 versus 20, a complete organised chaos, free for all. And then it would only break up when several of us were sent off, which was otherwise known as being called in for a dinner. And we didn't know it at the time, but we were exercising our human right as children to play. It was our rite of passage, whereby playing our own games, picking our own teams, making our own rules, and playing daily on the playground, at home, or at after school. It was a ritual, and it was something we looked after, we controlled, and it was about us. It was for us, with us. So reflecting on that, it allowed us to kind of improve all our different skills technically, that were transferable to life, in fairness, in terms of creativity, imagination, resilience, respect, self-regulation, ownership of the rules, conflict resolution, which happened a lot in terms of fights, and we'd have to sort it out for ourselves. There was no coaches, no parents around. So all of that obviously helped us in terms of our own learning and development. But as society changed, less informal play happened, and the structure kind of youth sports is now, a lot of it is now adult-centric, adult-centered, with young people relying on their parents to take them to practice, to take them to sport and activities. And we've seen a massive through the research as well, not just anecdotally, a massive decline in street games, and especially now in the times that we're in over the last year and 2 months in terms of the pandemic. Online has become more prevalent. Play has become less prevalent. Obviously, sport and activities has become less prevalent. So that impact on children, on all adults and all coaches and everybody in society is huge. And this is where these 3 webinars, I feel that Chris and Derry GAA are thinking, yes, about the child, but they're also thinking about you as coaches. And that's what you're going to get a lot from with Richard and me this evening, is that the games and the play, the link, as well as the link with the fundamental skills that myself and Terence talked about in the first week. So my main aspect is the family games from the GAA context. So again, I hope to kind of give you a few what if questions, or I wonder if that would work for us. And the resource that I'm going to go over, they will, and your clubs are probably already using them in terms of the Gaelic Start Manual and a few other things. But again, I want to go back to my experiences and how I use the resources. So games, play and learning, kind of to me, they're all interlinked. They are about creativity, imagination, exploration, opportunity, enjoyment, learning, relationships, connections, creating a positive environment for people to thrive, person development, not only player development, but also most importantly, fun for the children, fun for you as a coach, fun for you as a parent, and then obviously you as a club, and we'll go into more detail on that later on. So the family games for me in terms of this model was from Terence. Most of the stuff I get are from Terence and parents. So the family games that I see and how I would have used it would have been going as a linear process. So going from target 1s, 2s, then up to 4s, and then maybe targets for more people, but then court games, then field, non-part, and then full invasion. However, development, as we know, and through the research as well, is not linear. And the real purpose and beauty of the Gaelic Start Manual programme for clubs is its flexibility for coaches, for clubs, and also for children and players. Because the way the cards are designed, they're designed mainly for parents and new coaches, and experienced coaches as well. But they're also very flexible in terms of giving the card to a child and say, can you set that up? Not worrying about dimensions and size and trajectory of everything. It's just, can you set it up from the picture? And then you come in as a coach and help collaborate. And again, I'll go into more detail later on that. But as I've spoke about kind of before, the balance of the needs and wants is the most challenging. So with the Gaelic Start programme, because everything is in there, and all the games, all the activities, how to set them up, how to make it easier, how to make it harder, challenge the players, different setups, as Terence has talked about before, that looks at more about the needs of the child and the needs of the nursery programme, but then the wants in terms of what the child wants, in terms of what games they enjoy doing. And the beauty of games is that no matter what way the game is, it depending on changing the rules, changing the size of the area, changing the equipment, that's going to impact on the rules or the scoring. So it's going to be different the next time you do it. And kind of being aware of not being afraid to change things. And if you're kind of struggling in terms of, okay, how am I going to change this game? The stepper principle is the main one, but the one that I would always use most is asking the children. I enjoy my coaching. When it was with Ulster GAA, I would have said I would have been in full Ulster GAA gear, sometimes in Fermanagh gear, depending on what I was doing. And I would say, listen, children, can you tell me how to change this game? Because I have no idea what I'm doing. I just like getting the swag. So that element of asking them and getting what their wants, but then you're tailoring to their needs as well. So that balance is more equal in relation to your coaching, but also making sure that you're hitting the wants of the children. But then figuring out your own needs and wants as a coach is important. And that's, again, the beauty of the Gaelic Start programme, is that whenever you have all the games and activities there, but for me, I would always pick things out, pick and choose what I want to do. I wouldn't do it linear. because I would start to get to know the children more. I would start to say, okay, well, Chris is really good at his catching, body catch, so I'm going to maybe do pick the fruit today. So think about his high catching. Richard is flying with his punt kicking, and he's great at doing it standing still and moving. But obviously, I'm going to try and put that in a game now. So he's going to have a little bit of pressure, somebody trying to put him under a little bit of pressure, trying to, whether it's a time limit or whatever. So that element as well is in the Gaelic Star program. And the family of games isn't all about kind of, when you think about the target games, for example, and I want to go back to this one, target games. So as you'll see there, 1A, so ones and twos. However, if we look at full invasion, so full invasion for Gaelic games, and looking at target in ones or twos, adults and inter-county players are playing a target game technically when you're playing full invasion, because obviously the target is the player you're passing to, or it's the goal or it's the point. So that element of target games being the easy option, yes, it is. You can make it as easy as you want. So a target game, throwing into a hoop, that's your target. Or Tony Scullion in his heyday, as we talked last week about Tony, is striking off both sides, getting off both feet. His target is a full back, maybe stopping the forward, but also when he gets the ball, he wants to pass to a teammate. If he gets up and scores, that's his target as well. So the fact that it's linear here on the screen, you can jump in and out and you can make it as hard or as easy as you want. And in terms of how I go about it and how I plan and develop and kind of have patience, no matter whether it's children, youth or adults, is everything that you see on screen. I talked last week about working with 3 to 6 year olds or adults. They're the only two groups I'll work with. As I said, I'll do workshops with others. But this here, in terms of planning, learning, development and patience, is the same for a 4-year-old in a nursery program as it would be for an adult player that I will be working with. So that needs and wants, you'll see, especially with questioning and telling. I'm going to go into that a little bit. I'll discuss a little bit more purposeful, and those that were on the call last week, in terms of purposeful play, being more purposeful in the games that you want to get the players to develop. Asking them, but not telling them, you're guiding them. So you're asking them the questions. Your questions might be more purposeful in terms of what answer you might want, but I never tell anybody what to do, similar to a webinar. I give my experiences and hopefully you'll take what you want from it. You make sense of it for your own coaching practices. But everything I do is chaotic, webinars especially. Apart from my wife and my family, my life is chaotic sometimes. But again, there's always a rationale and a purpose to everything that I do. So the games are a perfect probably acronym and probably a description of my life and how I coach. Organized chaos, but there's always a rationale behind it. There's always a learning theme that I have in my head, but I'm not afraid to go on a different direction to think, okay, well, Gavin McGeehan done that, so I'm going to have a look at that. I'm going to see if everybody could do what Gavin was doing. So that element of games allows for that because there's so much happening and there's so much that you can do with it. This, what looks like a complicated, how can I describe it? A complicated model and planner that you see on your screen isn't really whenever you kind of go into each individual area. And I'm going to give you an example. So looked at target games and court games and field games as well, and you'll see the family games are in the green, down FOG type. And I'm going to look at court first. So court games, whether it's tennis or whatever, or clean your bedroom, clear your room, clear the pitch, whatever you want to work it, whatever you want to call it. But it's always 2 players, and it can be playing with or against them. So in this case, I'm going to go 2 against 2 on a court game. So we can't obviously pass to go onto the other side. It's me and Richard against Aisling and Chris. And we're looking at the overhead catch. Now, if we still do the rolling and fielding, that's fine. If we do the body catch, that's fine. But in my head as a coach, I'm looking at the overhead. I haven't told the children this though. They know it's 2v2. They're looking at catching, but I won't tell them that either. We're using the balloon, so they will have seen that. And it's the body. So again, their target could be the body, or it could be space. And again, it depends on what you want. So if I wasn't using a balloon and I was using a bean bag to throw a bean bag, I would be looking to maybe throw the bean bag onto the other side into space. If it drops, if it stays on the ground, I get a point for my team. If it hits somebody, I don't get a point because I haven't looked for space. But in this case, it is about hitting the body or being close enough that you're running in and catching it. Again, I haven't told the children that yet. So this is how I would set it up. So 1/6 of the hall. So going back to what I'm going to show you, what you've seen the first week with Terence and last week with me in terms of the setup. So if we're doing 6 games and this is one of the 6 games. So it's 1/6 of the grid that we're using. Now there's a time limit, right? So all I've said in the game, so forget about the overhead and the catch. So it's 2v2. We have to get the balloons to the other side and we have to get as many balloons across the other side in 10 seconds. Now, obviously, there's more than one balloon here. So I would always give more equipment than there is players. If it's 10v10, I would go 5 and 5 or 7 and 7. So 14 pieces of equipment. But again, it doesn't have to be a ball, bean bags, towels, socks, balls, bean bag or balloons. Because all it is once they get it, they have to clean their bedroom. So they're cleaning their side of the game. If anything's on their side, grab it, throw it over, grab it, kick it over, grab it, roll it over, doesn't matter. After the time limit, the more equipment that is on the other side of the game. So if me and Chris we've counted out, we have 6 things on our side, so 6 balloons. And Aisling and Gavin have 10 balloons. So they haven't cleared the bedroom as well as us. So we win the first point. We start cheering, but obviously the coach says, I wouldn't be cheering yet because the game is going to change very soon. Because then we're going to try and beat our record. Or sorry, we're going to go time limit again, but we might go beat your record. So can the team who got 8, can you now get less on your side? So then they might be going faster, they might be trying a little bit more tactically. Are they going to cover a certain area? Are they going to go one in front, one behind? Are they going to go close together? They'll figure that out and they'll try and do that. And again, that's where you can come in and talk about that. Or why did you do that? Ask them a question. Why did you go one in front, one behind? Why are you both staying back? Or why are you both up the front so they can throw it over your head? They'll give you a rationale for it and then you can discuss it as a group. So this can be used for anything. And again, you can take what you want out of this, but there's a rationale behind it. The handling, kick and striking is the main skill you're going to use. The skill element, it depends on what you're doing within handling, kick and striking. But again, it's a nice little planner. It's one of the things that Terence would have used, and it takes a lot of trial and error. But it's something that when you do get this resource, have a go at it and see if it works. Or if it doesn't, then you can come up with your own thing. So again, thinking back on last week in terms of the research, and if we're doing loads of discovery, so loads of independent, player-led, child-led, and then being more purposeful. So asking them, okay, what do you think? How do you think this would feel if you were to kick it out of your hands? But in terms of the actual learning and in terms of where I am in terms of my research, and again, the zone of proximal development, scaffolded learning, and Richard will go into a little bit more detail on that, being a university lecturer, the player and child, player and coach, player and parent, child and parent, working together, asking each other questions, learning from each other is, again, through the research is where most of the learning can take place. But again, depending on the behavior, depending on the age, you might have to go a little bit more purposeful. And if you know them really well and you can trust them, you can go more discovery. But the balance of the collaborative approach means that you're hitting their needs and wants, and also that balance and that working together is very strong. So looking into that, so again, last week, and just thinking on what we talked about there now, the plan that Terence done the first week and I talked about last week again in a different setting, all of the activities here, have a think and could these all be games? So I know that the hurdles is generally, there's two people there, and it could be 1v1 or it could be 1v1. Is it a game? Is it not a game? When does it become a game? So have a think about that, because I'm going to go into a little more detail about where I'm coming from and what I think about it. But again, the setup and the number of coaches that you have, the planning that you're putting in, making sure that the children are catered for, that Richard's going to talk about autonomy supportive environments, that there's loads of choice. But again, that behaviour and that needs and wants, you obviously, if you have too much choice, the behaviour of the children can be impacted on that, good or bad. But also, it mightn't be a fun activity for the coach themselves. They might feel under more pressure, the more people in the game. Obviously, there's more to think about safety-wise. So your planning is extremely important. But everything that you do can be a game. And just keep that in your head as well. I'll go on to that a little bit more later on. So I have a couple of slides and kind of just to finish off. So we talked about this in the first week, and the magic principles are something that you, in your clubs, you all do. You mightn't realise how much you do it, but your sessions in the nursery are varied. By playing games, it's varied. The family of games are age appropriate. And again, whatever rules you put in, whatever stage and whatever skills you put in, obviously make sure it's to the developmental level of each player and child. The Gaelic Start programme is all about growth, the progress of each player, but making it easier and harder, more challenging. And again, that challenge helps with making it to the appropriate level of the child, that it's pitched at the right area. It's inclusive. No matter what additional needs that child has, everybody's able to play, and the games can be catered for everybody as well as all ability levels. And obviously person-centered. I talked about kind of before last week a little bit about child-centered, but I've included different roles, and you'll see there that if it was a group of three, so me, Richard and Chris, and it was me and Chris playing handball. And to play handball, me and Chris are playing maybe with each other, seeing how many we can get, because then the other two on the next game we're playing against them. And Richard is our counter. So then it's Richard's go against me or with me, and then it's Chris and Richard. And then it's back to me and Chris, me and Richard, Chris and Richard. So that rotation happens. If we're going one against one, me and Chris, Richard is the referee. So he's experiencing a different role. He could be, instead of being a referee, he could be a coach. He could be watching us. What could we do better? Again, a different role. So that's extremely important. And again, whether they're 4 years of age or adults, I would always encourage them to watch their siblings, watch their peers. And if they give you an answer, it doesn't matter. But the fact that they're observant, and Richard will go in a little more detail about noticing. So that comes into that also. I have a little story about kind of Rockland. So in relation to the games, what we did in Rockland was, without realising it and having read the research and having done my own and what I'm doing now in terms of the doctor of professional practice, I didn't realise we were meeting the needs of the children through Article 12 and Article 31. So in Rockland, we would have done a lot of in-house games, in-house blitzes, in-house festivals, and practice for every age group from under 6 to adult was twice a week with a game at the weekend. From April to the end of July, and then we'd CYC, and then from September, the fall season from September to November. So the season was split mainly because of weather. But again, under 6s twice a week, and then fun games at the weekend, and then adults twice a week and a game at the weekend. Now, the main reason for the practicing twice was not, many World Cup stars. Like, we weren't thinking about their scholarships or anything like that. It was to allow parents to get to at least one practice. But we tried to change the culture by introducing that one practice per week had to be all games. Pick the teams, let them play. No coaching. If you want to do any coaching, bring them in at halftime, get them to coach each other. And I talked about that in the first week. So the under 8s and under 10s had 60 players. So they would have had 6 teams of 10. Now, some weeks it would be 6 players would not be able to come, and that would leave one team with 4. The team that they were meant to be playing against that week had 8 players. But because of the way we worked it, some players in that team had to go and play with the other team. But it wasn't the perceived weaker players. It was rotated around. So those players that went and joined the other team, they wouldn't be doing that the next week. It'd be another players if they had to. But everybody played. It was 4v4, 6v6, 10v10. Everybody played. There's no subs. So that mini league was really good. But then the under 14 coach was in a completely different context. So he was working with the Fela group, Fela age group, and Rockland players would make up most of the New York Fela team. So a lot of the under 14 players will be down in Gaelic Park practicing for Fela, which is another kind of webinar in its own in terms of Fela in America and on CYC, etc. Coming home to Ireland is intercounty. It's like being in the Derry senior squad. So that's kind of how it's taken. But again, our under 14 coach asked me, well, how can I do games for one practice if I'm only having 8 players? Because the rest of the players were doing Gaelic Park. So all I said was 1v1, 2v2, 3v3, 3v1 games. And again, how we did that was kind of related to the acronym of games and the acronyms, playing the acronym Nursery that I'll go into a little bit later on. But that's suited then in terms of the player pathway framework, and we were linking in F1 and F2 and F3 because it was all the way up to adult. But in terms of the games program, in relation to the player pathway framework, the coordinated, balanced and coherent games program was so vital. And having that from nursery right up to adult, and I know Derry are changing and having a go at a consultation in terms of how best to suit clubs and how best to work with clubs in terms of the games program, education, etc. So the games play a vital role in that because it's the 4th key recommendation. But again, having games in play from nursery all the way up to adults, you're ticking every single F on this in terms of F1, F2 and F3. So finishing off in terms of the acronym. So the acronym that you see now, so games, is actually from the Introduction to Coaching Gaelic Games resources from the GAA Ladies Football in Camogie that hasn't been released yet because of COVID. It's been kind of pushed back in terms of the launch. But the acronym has a goal. There has to be a goal of why you're doing the game. So it could be the skill. So, okay, I'm playing this game because I want to get them to think more about their body catch. They have to be moving, so active. Has to be motivated, so they have to be kind of bringing points and scoring into it will help motivate them. Playing against their friends, playing with their friends will help motivate them. So there's a different couple of ways you could do motivation. By playing games and scoring, it's going to be enjoyable. Now, enjoyable doesn't always mean fun, but learning is fun. And thinking that you've learned something and you can take it again into another game or into another setting or another sport, that's enjoyable as well. So that intrinsic motivation then extrinsically as well is very important. And again, it has to be scoring. So no matter what the activity is, if you're scoring, it's a game. So throwing a beanbag into a hoop, and I'm playing against Chris, he's doing the same. Every time I get in, I get a point. I'm playing against him, that's a game. And then that's a target game as well though. And then target and full invasion, full rules, 15 aside, adults, the target is their teammate. They're not getting a point for it, but obviously they're getting a point for sticking it over the bar or 3 for in the back of the net. So again, depending on what game you're doing or activity, if you're scoring, it's a game. Speaking with Jer O'Connor, one of my colleague, obviously, but also another mentor of mine, we were speaking kind of over the last couple of days about nursery. So he thought about the acronym of nursery, as you can see. So they're the newest underage recruits that you're going to have, and they're sampling enjoyable recreational games. And the last one, they're young yields. So they're the youngest age group, getting that foundation age, that player pathway, that player conveyor belt from 4 or 5 years of age all the way up to adult. But then don't finish at adult. They become coaches, they become administrators. That family, coach, community, all of that interlinks as well around the child and the player. And by doing that, when you do that, you're obviously playing. So asking them questions. Rich will go into a little bit more detail about about his research, but in terms of me being purposeful, learning, asking you. So asking them a question about what they're doing is being purposeful. So that element of play, games, nursery, you're all doing this at some stage, and guarantee you in your nursery programs and with your clubs and your players. So again, just be more purposeful about your planning. I know Chris is obviously doing case studies also. So link in with as many different coaches as you can. Look up other sports, watch other sports, observe other coaches, Twitter, Facebook, all of the different social media channels. It can be a little bit daunting at times, but the fact that you're on this webinar, you're networking a little bit with myself and Richard and a couple of people who know on the call, haven't met them, and they're always that network of kind of fellow coaches. I ask them questions. I ask Richard loads of questions. I reflect my own practice, and I have lots of mentors, people who I can bounce things off, I can talk to, who understand, because I don't want to stop learning. And my learning never stops, no matter what I'm doing, because development of players never stops. You'll see in terms of the main resources, the 3 book resources in terms of games for Dublin GAA and the Jer and John Morrison, God rest him, had come up with, as well as the Gaelic Star program. So they'd be the 4 main books that I would be using, that I used for this webinar. But you will see in terms of connections with me, with Special Olympics, my previous role, being involved with ICO's Kids, Sport Ireland, Sport Northern Ireland have a great sample of resources. I've included connected coaches. Richard, that's a hat tip to Richard in UK Sport in relation to his few blogs around creativity and coaching. And going back to the Bangkok traffic jam, Richard talks about the ignition and that initial spark, and he definitely created that in terms of that facilitation of that workshop, and he discusses that in more detail. So don't be afraid to kind of use as much resources as you can. In terms of Mike is a Hall of Fame NFL player, and I'm not even going to read that, I don't need to. Game, play, enjoyment, fun, and that's from an adult, and that's from a Hall of Famer. So make sure that you're, always coming back to the child or the player that you're working with, as many as possible, for as long as possible, in the best environment possible. And just remember that children are like wet cement. Whatever falls on them makes an impression. And that picture that you see there with the grandfather and his son and his grandson is, I actually know the little man, and I know his daughter, who the grandfather, I know his daughter is a good friend. And that has resonated with me, because no matter what happens, the effect that we have on children and players, and Rich will go into more detail, whatever falls and makes an impression, and that's both positive and less positive. So just be aware of that. They mimic and they follow. So be a good example. I'm going to hand over now to Richard. This is, again, the references that I've come up with, that I've read over in terms of these 3 webinars. So you can use them if you want, but Chris will be sending all this to you, including the recording. I'm going to hand over to Richard now, and Richard, you should be able to kind of share your screen and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Let's hope the technology works, which is...
So yeah, just make sure you make sure for your sound.
Yeah.
So you might have to go out of it again, just to make sure that so go out of your, so stop sharing, just to make sure that and then stop sharing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So whenever you start sharing it, remember, you'll see the thing at the top and then the little box with the line through it. Just make sure that the line isn't on it, because then your sound will play.
Right. Okay. Good evening, everybody. You can tell that I'm very what's the word? Old-fashioned. Don't know. Technology averse. I should be much more competent with it now. But anyway, thank you very much for joining this evening, and thank you very much for the invitation, Owen. It's always good to it's always good to work with you, and I've had just such really enjoyable experiences working with coaches when I've been over with you, and obviously the first time we met was probably a pivotal moment in my work, definitely realizing that I remember turning what I called cold blue to red hot in an hour and a half. So it endorsed my kind of work and views around play and coaching. So thanks so much, guys. So we've got, it's an open forum. Please ask any questions you've got. The important thing is that it's the context you work in is the important part. So don't say to me that wouldn't work where I am, or how would that work where I am. It's really important that you feel you can ask that, and I've tried to contextualize it. So I'm obviously not familiar with the sport in terms of the rules and so on, and never having coached or played it. My kind of work around tonight is sort of conceptual understandings for you to think about when you apply that to your work. Okay, so three things tonight. Reflection and self-awareness. Reflection is very much reflecting upon our childhood. If we look back, very often it gives many of the answers and will shape how we are. And a good coach is a reflective coach, one who's looking back and kind of learning from his experiences. Some self-awareness, and that's how we are viewed, how we view ourselves, a little bit more think about how we are. Understanding through observations. So what's that telling me? What's the cues that are coming back from the group? So one of the point that Owen made is about being flexible and dynamic, and he used the word agile. Are you an agile coach? And what that means is that when a session's running, whatever you've got planned is not set in stone. Can you be mindful of what needs to change, what the group are doing, what they want, and be intuitive about your response for that? So that's a lot of the work we're talking of tonight. And the application is really some ideas. So how can I take these ideas to where I work? Okay, I just wanted to bring a few kind of things really, and I've been listening to a few podcasts certainly around the brain recently, and obviously the situation we've all found ourselves in what is nearly exactly a year this week since our world's changed. Look at the first one, the physical pain of social isolation and exclusion. We are social animals. We like to be together. We like to play together. We're no different as an adult as we are as a child. And we are in an environment where children come for that wonderful socialization, that joyfulness of being with each other. And the coach said to me the other day, I'm not sure what first session should be like when we eventually can come back and coach, play. I said, well, just let people be together. Let them have that time together. It will be what it will be. Don't structure it, just let it roll. Social bonding, coming together. We've been doing it for thousands of years. When we should really be doing what we've been doing successfully for years, and bringing people together. Sport is that community, that friendship. Owen talks about the friends that he knows and the families that he knows from that. We all have a significant circle of friends and relationships through sport. You are the ones who provide that environment for them. And in terms of the brain, we are, driven to be together. We like to be together. The online space doesn't afford us that, but we do know that when we do have the opportunity, I think it will make us realize the importance even more when something is taken away. So, summing up, we are looking at a setting that is bringing people together. And I always think what we're afraid of. So I've tried to kind of answer this a little bit in two ways. I want to answer the questions for you, but these are some questions that I've had from coaches. But if they're playing, I'm not doing anything. They don't need me. But they're not learning. I'm not teaching them anything. But people are watching me and they're thinking, well, he's not doing anything. And in fact, all of those are not true. You have a really important role. Owen mentions about, this guide. You are a guide. So actually, if they're playing, they're learning. And what you're doing is you're giving, I use this word permission. You're creating an environment where play is given permission. You know, you're creating an environment that is allowing it to happen, letting it flourish. You're not redundant. You know, I feel redundant. The older my daughter gets, I feel less of a parent because I'm not needed. But actually, what I've done, you know, that's evolution. You know, our children are on loan to us, as I was told the other day. So when they are playing, just allow them that space, allow them that important part of their development. You know, you're not redundant because you're having a very significant role in there, and you'll know when to step in. They'll come and ask you when they need you. They'll come with ideas. You can add to their ideas. You can say to them, what are you doing? What are you trying to achieve? Be invested and interested in what they're doing. The worst thing is to go in and try and shape something that they are already doing that is really successful. So there's a wonderful book that I read, and it just spoke of the parent going into, so the father went into his son's room and his son was playing this game with his friend, and he felt like an amateur walking onto an NBA court because children are masters of play and we've grown away from that. So we mustn't bring our world to them. We must go into their world. So I suppose that, you know, one of the things I always want to be able to do is to say, well, how do I know? Okay, so I read a lot, I watch a lot, I mess about a lot. And this is the university students from 2 years ago. And this was their final lecture. And this is what they did. I didn't influence it at the time, but I had influenced over time. And so if you look at the first point, the more we directly instruct and the more we tell, we take away that curiosity. In those early years, it's about them finding their way in the world, exploring, playing with shapes, playing with balls, playing with each other, finding out and investigating the world they're new to. And if we do stifle that with our view on it, then they don't make those unexpected connections. And the great thing about creativity and learning in imagination is that we can connect the seemingly unconnected. You know, Owen has mentioned a few times about the balloons. I mean, that has so many options. Who would have thought, in terms of skill acquisition, movement skills, engagement, fun, playfulness, that one balloon would have so many different options. And the example of the Bangkok traffic jam is, and I'm happy to share the grid I've got, which explains the story, is that when you teach and play through storytelling, lots of connections come in there. We learn really well through stories. We play with stories. We imagine we are the king of the castle. We imagine we're a gorilla. And then you feed that story and you add different animals into it and different characters. But if you take that over, you don't allow them to have those connections, to bring their world into that world you're in at the time. Okay, so the human pyramid, I mean, again, it was just a pivotal moment to think that they would have never dreamt it in year one, but in year 3 this is what they finished with. Again, this is what I think. I talk about projection. So what do you project? We'll come back to it a bit later. I know we're mindful of time, but week 1, lecture 1, my new students exercise in building. We do a picture game in the middle about names, and we do a construction exercise. They give them a load of different things. They can build what they want, and they build various different things. One group built me out of an upturned coffee cup. Now, the point behind that is that you give an environment where they will play, they will be creative, they will be imaginative. They're not looking for something they think I want. That's the point. They're finding their way, and actually they're giving me ideas. So what are you projecting that gives people the feeling they can explore and can be playful? Okay, we're going to show you another picture in a minute. So if people in the room are playing, or people in charge of your time, then usually, unless there's some form of dictator, implicit permission for you, that is implicit permission for you to play as well. So I walk into that environment. What am I walking into? And I've used this slide, a few times, but I'll give you the story behind this. This is that, going back to that previous slide. What environment are you creating? What is becoming infectious? What are people walking into? So I did a presentation in Canada a couple of years ago. There were 3 presentations at the same time. I had 30 people signed up. The doors were open and we were playing with these balloons. People just came in and joined. I had 65 in the end. Because what ended up happening, if you go back to the previous slide, it's permission to play. They felt it was okay. They took their armor off and they joined in. Children don't have an armor. They're free to play. It's a very important time for them. A phrase we always use, you've got one childhood. What does it look like? What did it look like? What did it feel like? How did it shape me? And so what I try and do is, if I'm going to develop and teach coaches, I want them to experience that playfulness themselves. I want them to experience it. So when they go into that environment coaching children, they have had a good experience of it. They haven't forgotten what it feels like. So on the left-hand side, we've got real free play in the what's called flip out with the trampolines. And the right-hand side, we've got exploration, discovery. What can they find out? And I'm trying to give them an experience of what I want their coaching to look like. Hope this will play, literally play. And why am I showing this video? I'm showing this video because it's a very simple game. 3 hoops each group. They've got to get them round and they mustn't break the circle. No, Owen, you have to sort of interject and tell me that with that played okay.
I just messaged you there, Richard. The sound is okay, but it's skipping a little bit. So it's probably because when we saw it yesterday, you were in university, so probably just your internet. But you can what I would envision on this as well is sending these videos on to Chris, so sharing it, and then we'll send it on to Chris so Chris can be able to give it to everybody for a resource as well.
Yeah, I mean it's what have I done now? I've kind of, and you mentioned the word about sense of belonging, and what I've done is I've tried to get the group to have this constant sense of belonging to the group. That by doing a lot of collaborative games, and again you mentioned that word collaborative, we don't always keep the same groups. We mix them around. We get one to work with each other. Everybody will work with everybody throughout the whole session. So end of every session that I coach, everybody will have had an interaction with each other at least once. And if you look at that, what are you seeing? I'm not giving the answers. You will know from that what's happening and the benefits of it. Okay, so just a thing on this, again, I'm mindful of the time. When you're looking at a session, are you looking at it through adult eyes or looking at it through their eyes? That's the important thing. You've got to constantly put yourself into that environment of the child. What are they experiencing? They are learning. They're engaged, they're socializing, they're working together, they're discovering, they're exploring. They're doing what children should be doing at that time. And that's the important thing to remember. That a lot of it is unguided. You may feel redundant, but actually, gradually, bit by bit, you can add things, add layers. As Owen talks about, you've got the step principle. You can, okay, well, let's work in this space. Let's use this equipment. How many can you? Why don't you work with someone you've not done before? I bet you can't. What could you do with the leftover pieces of this marble run? So you're beginning to give some influence it, but they're still playing, they're still learning. Okay, lovely chat with Owen yesterday about this slide. It's reflective of really where we are. we cut down the trees. Removal of acts of spontaneous play and exploration. So your session may be the only trees they can climb.
Sorry, Richard, the slide hasn't come up just. The tree
Oh,
slide.
okay.
Oh, that's it now. That's you now. Yeah.
Have you got it now? Okay. So Owen, just feel free to, join in the conversation around this discussion we had yesterday, because I think it was really poignant what we spoke about. I grew up in Somerset. There were trees we could climb. I go back home, those trees aren't there. Our natural exploration space has been urbanized. There's streets we can't play in. We maybe live in a flat. The nights are dark, so we come home from school, we can't go out. And all of those things cumulatively mean that, and particularly now with lockdown as well, which we know will pass and we'll go back to where we were. But still, we have an obligation as a coach, and I use that word, because many of them, that may be the only time they can have that play experience with each other. Okay, so really value that time. They will value it.
And that links in very well with the nursery program and what Chris and the clubs, especially in Derry, in terms of the case studies that Chris is doing, but also the fact of creating that positive environment so that they stay and play with their club, but also eventually and stay and play within Derry GAA as well. So, as you talked about there, Richard, is that connection and that environment. And as parents, club, families, having a positive impact and letting them play, but also playing through games. They're looking at the fundamentals. So there's a lot to do, but again, playing games is a really good way of doing that, especially with the nursery end.
Yeah, I mean, when you've mentioned about that staying with clubs and staying, this slide here is about co-creating, being invested. These are students I taught. They didn't want to be in the classroom. I said, okay, where do you want to learn? They said, we want to learn over the road. We went over the road, and I did the what and we did the how. I knew the content. You know the game. The children don't know the game, the rules of the game yet. I don't know the skills of the game, but they know the how. And I think that's important. When you co-create something, you are getting investment from those in the group. They're more invested. They're shaping that environment. Okay. So it's really lovely. It's an interesting thing to do. If you say, okay, we're going to do this today. How do you want to do it? And they say, can we? Okay, well, let's do that then. Because that shared investment in learning does really strengthen the bond between you and them, between them and each other, and between them and what they're learning. I'll never have a slide of one of my lectures in a classroom with a slide up. Okay, you'll never see that, because it does happen. But we create an environment where we want to, again, going back to Owen says, how can you flourish? How can I make you thrive? And how can I be agile? And that's saying, okay, well, these are the cues that are coming back from the children. I'm going to harness that energy. I'm going to go with it. I'm not going to stop it. Always a phrase, it's been a great time until a coach came along. Okay, and that's never forgotten that. You look at people, the kids are messing about, waiting for you to arrive, and you arrive, and then bang, this order, structure, okay, and the energy just gets taken away. Can we look at what they're doing and harness that? That's great what you're doing. Okay, why don't we, tell me one of the rules. So you actually join into what they're doing. Again, I'm looking at the time. I just want to show this. This is reflective of something really. So this is some work I did with Fulham and Villarreal, research into the benefits of small-sided games, and we ultimately talk about the games. The point behind this is, as you can see from the data here, it was measuring. You can see in the black and the red. The black is 3v3. The red is 11v11. Player 1 had 33 or 100 touches in a 3v3 game, and only 5 in the 11v11. So it's a very quantifiable, measurable, statistical observation on that environment. What is it not telling us? And I suppose the point is that when looking at games, we need to really be open-minded to what that game is telling us. It's telling us about their interactions, about their engagement. It's giving us indication of imagination. there's lots of cues. We just need to be receptive to it. It's them exploring and discovering, again, words that Owen uses. And they will teach you. It's inevitable they will teach you. They'll have some really good ideas because they're free thinkers. They're going without a feeling of constraints. Just a simple example here, and this is, hopefully this will play. So this is the South Downs Country Fair. What it's saying, young children especially have enormous creativity, and whatever in them rises to service in free play. And actually, when I did work with Owen for the first time, when they were given free play, their imagination, creativity really came to the service because they were given permission, because it was infectious. They looked left and right, and everybody was doing it. They got that permission from each other, that permission from me, that permission from the environment. So this is my daughter, just got bored waiting for an ice cream, and then decided she wanted to learn to surf. We live about 50 miles inland, so I'm not quite sure when it's going to happen. But I think in that short clip, we were 20 minutes there, and that's fine. That's fine. That 20 minutes, I learned. She was determined. It was her setting, her environment, her exploration. Hopefully this will show with sound.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm coming towards the end, but I suppose what I want to try and get you to think about is what experiences do you attach to their learning? Okay, so what will they won't remember necessarily, my students don't remember the content, they remember the how, okay, which is fine, I know that. But what Owen again is talking about is coming back to club, lifelong attachment to the sport and to each other as friends. And I suppose I wanted to bring my little world to your world, because if you listen to this here at the age of 6, age of 6, and then we go to the age 9 on a downhill track in the pouring rain. The origins of the video on the right are in the video on the left, because we've given that exploration, that free play, that joyfulness. It's a really powerful word, joy. Very rarely is it happy, but joyfulness stands out. In words, it sounds like what it is. 3 jumps to move. Hear my anxiety. So
just on that, Richard, when you couldn't really hear you when the videos were playing. So if you just give the context to both videos again, and especially on the one on the right in terms of the jumps and who was saying break and what happened.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. This is one we spoke about yesterday, and apologies for that, guys. I think it's very important doing presentations. This is the strength again of and I think this is how me and Owen have always connected, is we bring anecdotal evidence. We show our worlds and share it with you. This is what happens. So this is my daughter on the left-hand side at 6, and then 3 years later, I kept that video, and 3 years later, pouring rain at a place called Rogate near where I live. It's a downhill track. GoPro on a helmet. On the section that you saw, there are 3 jumps, and you could hear the laughter and joyfulness on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, on the 3rd jump, when she's in mid-air, you can hear her dad, i.e. me, shouting break, 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 which is the worst thing you can do when you're mid-air on a mountain bike, obviously. But it was my fearfulness And actually, I thought, why, my parental concern, but actually, by nurturing your child and creating an environment where they explore, feel free to explore, and they know themselves very often better than we do, is that I just didn't need to do that, because that journey from the left hand to the right hand had been gradual, bit by bit, those layers, that lovely diagram that Owen shows, which is like this snake going round, starting in 1v1s and ending up, this is the journey. And I should have had greater faith, but I do now. And I suppose what we come back to is you can take those 2 videos out, add videos of your coaching over a period of time, listen to the sounds they make, look at the behaviors and the smiling faces that come back to you, and think that is what they remember of the environment that you create. It's the experiences you give them and the experience they are allowed to discover and find themselves. Okay, and I'm just mindful of time, so will they actually make this my last slide and do some questions? Unless you've got, are we okay for time, Owen? I'm very mindful of that.
A couple of minutes there, Richard. Yeah,
Yeah.
couple of
Okay.
minutes.
Something called retrospective coherence. Very bold phrase, I know. Let's simplify it. Well, if we look back, we have our understanding. We join the dots, and your childhood that you experience may inevitably be influence how you are when you coach. You think, this is what I love to do, okay? And this is why I now surf, because I had a log and a plank when I was 6. I had the great outdoors when I was 7, 8. My parents took me out. And that influencing part of that environment is lifelong, and it is sustainable, because I remember, we have very deep-rooted attachments to positive learning, to playful environments. And you are those wonderful coaches who allow that to happen, create those environments where that happens. Okay, this book has been interesting for me because it's very contemporary. We expect more from technology and less from each other. So we wake up in the morning, maybe we don't say good morning to our partners before we turn and get the phone out and check if you've got any Twitter messages or what the news is. And actually, what I've learned about that is that technology is there, but we still it does not replace being with each other. Okay, your environments are richer than the online environments. Okay, we kind of grown away to a connection with somebody on something that we haven't met or spoken to as being a connection. But actually, when we come together, we have all those interactions, those facial expressions, that conversations, those micro conversations, the sharing, the intimacy of being with people. And that's the beauty of a playful setting. All of that is happening in a children's environment. And we go to the pub on a Friday night, and it's happening in an adult environment. All those importance of connections. Okay. So I suppose I didn't want this to be a checklist, but when you step back and think, okay, well, I'm not going to let them play, or they are playing, I'm just going to let them watch. This is some observations. What am I looking at? They're trying things out. They're making things up. They're using their imagination, which we know is one thing which is very rich in children. It becomes a little bit squashed from us as we grow older. They're engaged, and this isn't my always, but now my description of engagement. Enjoyment speaks for itself there. You can tell that. This engagement is something I thought, well, there's nothing they'd rather be doing than what they're doing now. Is that how we can hold them in that space? Fully engaged, not looking across at other sessions or to other people. It's the immersion that play gives us. Okay, I like this book. I love this book, actually. It's funny. I didn't write it. Don't sell it. No reason to sell it. But I wanted to see if I could think about this point which I mentioned at the beginning about self-awareness and reflection. I think of the great comedians, Tommy Cooper, Frank Carson, these sort of people, Lee Evans, from my world, I suppose, and Peter Kay. They project humour almost before they've ever said anything. And what you project will come back to you from the environment you create. And I looked at this slide from this part of this book, and it's in my burnout. It was playfulness was the first thing to disappear. Not that I noticed, I was far too grumpy to notice. I didn't notice, in fact, until my trial shift with the kids when I danced around the kitchen with a song turned up loud and on my iPhone. And I suppose I want to put this in there, being mindful for you as coaches, it's inevitable that we will finish work tired. We're in a tired space at the moment. And that playfulness has been lost because we aren't playing as we would normally, and the children aren't playing with each other as they would normally. But it's the noticing of it that's important. And that very soon we can come back to that environment. And this is when you become that great orchestrator of what will happen. Okay. My students reminded me of it when I taught them once. Said, "We knew when you were moving house, Rich." I said, "Why is that?" I said, "Because you were grumpy." I said, "Oh, sorry about that. I'm really sorry." I said, "All right, don't do it again." And I thought then, okay, I projected what I didn't want to project. And that's, if you want playfulness to come to you, you've got to go and be that energy bunny when you go and meet them. You've got to be 6, 5 again. Okay. For me, it's a long time ago. And I suppose, and a final one, which I like this anyway, the difference between wisdom and knowledge, maybe something harder to finish on, is the difference between the two. So there's 2 men packing for a trip in the wilderness in Canada. And one of the men is packing these beautiful red trainers. And he said, and his friend said to him, "So why are you packing trainers?" He said, "Well, might come across a bear." And his friend says, "Well, you know what? You'll never outrun a bear." And he said, "I know. I just need to outrun you." Anyway, the story had an happy ending because the man and the bear now live very happily in somewhere in a log cabin in Canada. So thank you for inviting me into your platform, Owen, and into your world. Always grateful. I hope there's been some things that are food for thought or questions that people may have.
Dr. Glasridge, so if you just want to unshare your screen.
Yep, of course,
and
yeah.
We'll come back in again.
Okay.
Back
in the order. Video on.
Yes, you know.
Yeah.
So just the way, so people cannot unmute themselves, because it's handier for me and Chris in terms of the background noise. So I put into the chat, if anybody's any questions, please put them in. Chris will ask them. But I have a question for you, Richard, and it goes. This is probably for Chris, in fairness, as well, and any other parents on the webinar. I'm not a parent. I have lots of nieces and nephews, so them climbing and falling and hurting themselves and breaking their bones or whatever they have to do is like, I know that's my sister and that's my sister-in-law's kind of realm, but and how I coach, like, I know that rough and tumble play is a big influence on it. But those 2 videos that you showed in terms of your daughter when she was 6, just going down a path, and the smile and the laugh that you got, versus the video 3 years later when you were telling her to break in midair, and then her knowing better, in fairness, and laughing at the end. My question is around safetyism, and probably for Chris and any other parent on. So in terms of play and letting them explore, where does the parent kick in and where does the coach kick in, and how do you balance those 2?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a fair question. Inevitably, as parents, we'll be concerned. They will be doing things that we've never thought they can do. But actually, what we've done, we've set a foundation for them to do that. We've set a foundation for them with those very good foundation skills that good environment where they've been able to try things. They've developed those movement skills. They've developed that ability to explore. And then we it's very difficult to risk averse, isn't it? I mean, you and I climbed trees and we fell out of those trees, but we landed and went back up the tree again. I think it's inevitable that children are going to, accidents are happening. The environment that we create is one that is obviously can be but just by the nature of that's what will happen. But I think that what the video taught me is about faith, and actually that the mountain bike isn't. If I'd seen her for the first time, I would have found it very difficult. But I do know the origins of that, so I'd never let her go down there in the first place if I didn't know her history. I think that's the important part. Obviously as a parent I know it, but as a coach I know it. So if I was a coach 3 years ago and I was a coach now, I'd take a sharp deep end breath, inevitably say that, but maybe I'd stop and give them a pat on the back and think, that's pretty cool. That came from somewhere good.
Glad. What about you, Chris, in terms of your two?
I had an interesting story at the weekend where it was one of the granda's birthdays. So they decided that we would go to the forest, big open space, and have a few round on a picnic. But we have been to this forest numerous times and had great fun, play park and different things. But we spent about 20 minutes sliding down on our bums and our good jeans down a hill. And both bums were completely black and jeans were completely bogging. But Bella said to me then on Tuesday, I didn't know there was that much fun in the forest. And I was like, what do you mean? And she says, that hill was so much fun. And it just resonates with the nice presentation around letting them play, letting them discover. My take on it is that it would be better to let them experience the play as opposed to never letting them experience play due to fear. But it was just an interesting one from the weekend, and took very little to amuse them. They had a ball, so just let them at it.
Yeah, I'm actually going to, Richard, you and Chris, you can ask Richard Martin's question. I'm actually going to answer it at my end, and you can ask Richard if you can't see it. So Martin has asked, do you find it difficult to reconcile allowing nursery-age kids in training to be creative and imaginative and free when you're trying as a coach to really manage and structure what they're doing? So a few things in that. So training. Train dogs, horses, children, players practice. So language is important in that, Martin, in relation to kind of having training in your head is fine, but the connotation of training and language and communication is important. And then the balance, I suppose, with you as a coach and their wants and their needs, their needs are what you want them to learn as nursery children, whether it's catching, passing, kicking, agility, balance, coordination, or running, jumping, throwing. But again, if you, Martin, Richard and Chris came to a session and it was the first session or the 10th session, at the start of each session, you'll get a piece of equipment, whether it's a ball, balloon, doesn't matter, and you'll be asked to show me what you can do. So by saying show me and have a go, I will get to see what you're comfortable with. And if I give you a ball right now, Martin, I know rightly you do stuff that you're comfortable with as an adult. And it's the same with 4 and 5-year-old children. Rather than saying, we're going to do the hand pass here. We have to do the hand pass when they can't even hold the ball properly, or they're moving and their balance is out of sync. So that balance of coordination to do the hand pass or catching is out of sync and it's probably too far ahead. So in relation to them being creative and imaginative, just saying, listen, putting them in groups of 4, giving them a ball, here's your area, you come up with the games. So Martin, you come up with the first one. And then Martin, you have 2 minutes. After the 2 minutes, it's Richard's go. So Richard can do a completely new game, or he can add in a rule for your game, Martin. And Chris can do the same. He can do a new game, or he can add in another rule for the game that you were doing, Martin. And that's, now you can then tailor that to what you think they need. So going back to the structure. So let's say you had handling in your head, and the games that they made up was all kicking. Everything was kicking. They weren't catching or nothing, but you had handling in your head and you had catching or holding or moving. Well, changing the games is simple. I don't care what you do in your game. Don't care what you do, what you come up with, but you have to use the ball with your hands. So there you're going to see catching, pick up. You might see throwing. You might see hand passing. You might see soloing. And again, you're structuring it in the way of you're guiding them rather than telling them. And if you were on the first webinar or the second webinar, we kind of discussed that in more detail. And it did last week in terms of the discovery, collaborative and purposeful, in terms of scenarios and how we would kind of reconcile that. But at the nursery end, safety, planning, making sure you have enough help, making sure they don't kill each other, behaviour, but parents staying is vital. Because if Chris's two children are messing about in the session and Chris is there, and I send Chris's two children over to Chris because they've been misbehaving, I can guarantee that that will not happen a second time, because Chris doesn't want to have his children being sent over to him more than twice. So the parents are disciplining the children then. And if they're coming every week, then they can help you out as a coach. So that element of creative, imaginative, and still having your structure, but not telling them, questioning them, giving them choice, but you're guiding them then, even though you have an idea in your head about what you want them to do, telling them it's coming from you, whereas guiding them, it's still about them, and you're collaboratively working with them. Anything different there, Richard, for you or Chris?
No, just absolutely just piggyback on what you say. Actually, it's that word guiding comes back again. I suppose this is the analogy I use. First of all, just remember why they're there. At that age, that socializing element and that enjoyment are critical. Learning will take place. We learn by being social animals, by being with each other. We'll communicate. You listen to how they talk with each other. And you can shape that approach. When you look at the concept of deliberate play, it reminds me of a hostage negotiator who came and spoke to my students. And I use this because what you're doing is you're kind of constantly in this negotiation in your head, even though they don't know about it.
Yeah.
So they want to play and have fun, and you want them to do these things. So I can get both of those. I can keep the kind of both parties happy. So if I say, "Wow, kids, welcome to the zoo," they go, "Wow, what zoo?" And so, "Well, it's our zoo." And they say, "What animal should you be?" And they'll go, "Oh, I want to be a crocodile. Let's be a crocodile." So what you've now got, they're fully immersed into a game they're invested in because it's their imagination, their creativity. But what you've got is engagement because they've chosen it, they've influenced it, and they're starting to move like. And we know that developmentally, crawling is a very important part of our physical development, as is balance, coordination, timing, all those fundamental movement skills. So the zoo is their game. The zoo for me is a movement skills environment. And they're bringing their imagination and creativity to it. The training is a word that will come later. These foundation things are the early experiences, the ones that I talk about continuation desire. And that means I loved it so much, I can't wait to come back. Okay, I watched the very first Lord of the Rings film. I didn't realise it was part of a trilogy. I was devastated. I had to wait a whole year for the next one. But I came back, it was that good. Okay, I wasn't mortified, I have to say. Broke me after 4 hours. But that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to think, what's going to make them go and jump in that car and talk about it?
All right, Darren.
So those are the things, and that's a way of manipulating it.
Yeah, you can. Good boy.
And probably just to kind of finish off on that question about having patience, Martin, as well. So Guns N' Roses, a tribute to Guns N' Roses. Just a little bit of patience, and it's a journey, and you're going to have swings and roundabouts, and you're going to have 2 steps forward to 3 steps back. It's not a linear process for children, for adults as well, but for you as a coach, lots of mistakes. But again, as Richard kind of said, and what we've talked about kind of in the previous webinars, if you've been on them, is that collaborative and giving them ownership of it. But again, you guiding it and you driving it without them realising it, as Richard just said.
Guys, I think
We
that's us.
almost need to live our life backwards, don't we? Need to be. Can we go back and be a child? Remember what it's like? It's like I want to become an adult coach again.
I actually just before Chris finishes, I have a similar story, Chris, about similar to that hill. Went with to an adventure park with my nieces and my sister, my brother-in-law, and my wife, and I had actually more fun than they had. I think there's this huge big boulder rocks, and I didn't show it today. I usually show it, in fairness. Showed last week's one about jumping in the puddles, but Kira took a photo. My wife took a photo of me climbing the rocks, and how many goes it took me to get from one end to the other, and how long it took me. So if I jumped off or I fell off, I'd go back to the start and do it again. So constantly learning and adapting and changing. And then we were in Galway, and then we go to Galway and walk along the pier. We have the wall, and the stoned wall, and I'm constantly, like, she's down here, and then I'm up on top of the wall, stepping on the stones, messing about, and that's just all the time with me. And I think it resonates then when I do go coaching. So I'm playing all the time anyway, but that play element and that having a go and kind of seeing what they come up with first, rather than telling them, is something that resonates in terms of the nursery program, but it also helps them in terms of fundamentals, play, and through the games, because it'll be them driving the games, but you there as a referee. And as Martin said, it's he said managing the structure. Like a lot of the time in nursery program, it's crowd management, and you're a bouncer more than anything else. It's behavior management, and it's tying shoelaces and stuff. But again, there has to be a purpose and a rationale for everything that you do.
Yeah. The rewards are very different. Those early years, the rewards are very different. They're not as measurable as they are when they're 8, 9, and 10, when you can see them pass, catch, kick. But the rewards are just different ones, and smiling faces, laughter, coming back next week, remembering your name, remembering their names, them behaving really well, having new friends. Those are good measurables of a nursery environment.
And again, just to completely finish off, that's one thing that I know in Chris's case studies, that's going to come out a lot because of the parent helpers, the parent coaches, the young coaches, how they plan and how they structure their nursery program to facilitate play, games, and fundamentals. So that'll definitely be coming out in Chris's case studies.
Hopefully. Look, that was excellent. Just to thank Richard for your time. A lot of rich information there, and really looking forward to going through the presentation again actually and getting a chance to digest some of that. So Richard, know you're busy. Thanks a million for your time. Really appreciate it, and it will be a valuable contribution to what we're trying to do here within Derry GAA.
If